Well, hi. It's good to see everybody this evening. Um, yeah, first of all, I'd just like to say that I'm going to be really racing with this because I want to get as much done as possible, and normally this takes a lot longer. Um, oh, that's interesting. I can't move. Hang on. There we go. First of all, I'd like to dedicate this talk in the memory of my good friend Trevor Davenport, who we lost early this year. Trevor was a real supporter of Corfu Butterfly Conservation, and um, he was, in fact, a judge in our last photographic competition, and we called it now the Trevor Davenport photographic competition. So thanks so much, Trevor, for all that you did. You're not forgotten. Okay, let's talk about the island of Corfu. So here in the left-hand side, you can see the UK, you can see Italy, and now if you look at this picture down on the left here, here is Italy again, and that little blue dot is Corfu. Here's blue Corfu on the right-hand side, and it's very, very close to Albania here. So it's close to the mainland. And when you think about it here, you've got Europe to the north, you've got Asia to the uh, east, and then you've got Africa to the west, sorry, the south. So it's no surprise that this island is at all the junctures, all these different places, and as a consequence, is very biodiverse. It's 580, 585 kilometers square. It's 63 kilometers long at its longest point, 28 at its widest point, and it has a coastline of 217 kilometers, and the highest point in Mount Pancrator, 906 meters, nearly a kilometer high. So you can see from this image here of Corfu that indeed, in comparison to some of the mountains in Albania, really it's really quite a lowland landscape. Now, look, if you're looking at the geology, and I've always found it really difficult to find, in fact, I haven't found any decent English maps looking at the geology of the island. The best one I found is this one here on the left, which shows really that the majority of it is quite young, Holocene, Pleistocene, Miocene deposits. But where the older stuff is up in the north and through the middle of it, which is carbonates, Triassic to Paleocene carbonates and Triassic breccia here. So mostly it's a basic type of soil that you find on the island, and that obviously affects the vegetation. Now, look, the precipitation is obviously most in the winter, very little in the summer, and obviously it gets very, very warm in the midsummer. And the climate, as we say on Corfu, is in the Ionian Sea, in the Mediterranean, is mild, rainy winters, hot, sunny summers, and the average temperature in January is 14 degrees Celsius, and that in August is 31. So, quite ideal conditions, really. And that gives us these many different types of habitats. So on my top left here, you can see the sea of olive trees. Now, the Venetians ruled Corfu for about 400 years, and they made an incentive for the Corfians to plant olives everywhere. And there's estimated to be about 3 to 4 million olive trees on the island. There's fenland. There's little open glades like this amongst some of the still native vegetation, which reminds me about the New Forest in some senses. You've got the Faringa and Garrigue vegetation along many of the pathways. You find little gaps in all of this where there are some agricultural plots, and then up in the very top, you've got this limestone pavement. And of course, there's the coast as well. Well, when you think about all of these things that coming together, you've got this incredible increase in butterfly species richness as you move further south. And you might say, well, Dan, that's obviously a really good reason for doing your work all the way down there in Corfu. And indeed, here's Greece and Albania. That whole region is really, really rich in species. But of course, no, that wasn't it. So in 2014, I had to have surgery for cancer, and I was unable to go out. And if you're a butterfly enthusiast, that time of year, all you want to do is go out. And I found myself thinking, what on earth can I do? So I turned to Facebook. It was a very simple thing. I set up a Facebook page, and in it I said, I invite you to post your records of butterflies and other wildlife on this Facebook page, and I have a whimsy about writing a book. That was it. I was hopeful that something would happen, but I was not in any way sure. So I posted some of the butterflies I'd seen on Corfu, and very little response. And then one day on a gardening Facebook page, I saw that somebody had posted this picture of the swallowtail on some Echium candidans. And it happened to be this chap, John Den. And I said to John, would you be prepared to put that on my Facebook page? And he did, and became very good friends. And over a couple of years, he would almost invariably tell me what he was seeing on a daily basis. And by 2015, John was able to tell me something about the species richness that he would find in his garden, because he'd walked basically the same route day after day. And you can see on this localized trend, over 30 species of butterfly in June he was finding in his garden. And then this is about out of date, because I see that here we have eastern dappled white, which we've got no evidence for at all at the moment. But you can see he had some in the region of like 44, 43 species of butterfly in his garden, which is similar to the number of butterflies that we have in the whole of the county of Sussex. So this is just ludicrous diversity on his 1 acre plot of garden. And as a consequence of doing this work, John pretty quickly figured out what ornamental species of plant the butterflies would nectar on, and that helped him really garden for butterflies. Well, over the course of the first couple of years, we gained, quite a few people, perhaps 150 to 200 people on the Facebook page. And I spent most of my time just encouraging people to learn how to identify things, showing them what the diagnostic features of different butterflies were, and encouraging them to, post up their images. And it was very simple. Facebook just allows that sort of thing to happen. But I'd been there in 1976 as a kid, and I'd seen a southern swallowtail, and I simply didn't know, is it still there? I mean, it was a long time since 1976. So I posted this up and said, it'd be really interesting to see what happens. Has anybody ever seen it? And look, that was days later. I found this in my swimming pool. So this was an immensely powerful thing. In Victorian times, people would have had to go on boats and travelled and to see these things. And this sort of digital era just made things so immediately accessible. And I was just absolutely delighted. And, at that point, I think nobody else really understood very much about the distribution of this butterfly. So yeah, that was very exciting. And of course, we slowly started to meet people. So here you see me on the left here, and then my friend here, Yanis Gastratos, and my good friend, Chris Little. These are very good friends now, but this was the first time that I'd ever met them. Cosmos Apiris is on the right-hand side. And we were all going out because we heard that there was this butterfly called the Southern Festoon, and no one was really quite sure about how rare or whatever it was. And we went to one location where we thought we could find it, and hey presto, look at that, we found it. Now look, I want you to first of all look at the habitat. Corfu is so temperate in the spring and autumn. It's just unbelievable, and it looks very much like British woodlands. Many of the species that you see there of vegetation, and indeed butterflies, are very, very similar to those that we see in the UK. So, I was delighted to see that. And once we'd figured out where the butterfly was, we figured out, what its habitat was. And then you could start to make some assessments about where it was and how common it was and so forth. Well, slowly over a couple of years, this is 2015 year now, this woman, Jan Wilcox, said, I found this big butterfly. Does anyone know what it was? And we were all excited because we knew that the plain tiger had been seen occasionally on Corfu. But she was talking about there being, quite a large colony that she'd walked through on the beach up in the north. So this got people excited. And, John Den went down, Chris Little went down. They all took photographs. I was in England. This is in October, and I was thinking, oh, should I get on an airplane and go and see this? This sounds really, really exciting. But, people were watching it over POSIT, watching the mate, looking at the host plant. And, this was just a really, really exciting thing. It was the first time that people started leaving their houses to go and look for the butterflies. Normally, they were just recording what they were seeing in their gardens. And look, even here, I was being given maps about where they were seeing things. And then this was really interesting because the local council got a bulldozer in, and they got rid of all the eelgrass that had washed up onto the beach with a bulldozer, and they put it onto this patch of land where these butterflies had established themselves. And I wasn't terribly worried about this because, of course, I knew they were migrants, and this was just a one-off year when they happened to land in this one particular location. But the local residents, the local people, were really up in arms about it, and I thought, hang on a minute, we've got the seeds of something here. And that was really very positive because I could see that people cared, and that what we've been doing up until now had made people start to feel like that there was something worth looking after. So, I gave a talk around that time, and I asked a few of the people that were on mind you, look at this. All of these are English except for one guy, Yanni. And I said to them, would you just say something about what the Facebook page does for you? And the thing that I liked the most was Jason Fisher's at the very bottom, who said the best thing about this group is a sense of community where everyone helps everyone else out. And I thought that's great. This is really moving the right direction. So the final word on Facebook, we're now at over 1,800 people who are members of that Facebook group. And, because we're now an organization, but we're not a membership paid and not a subscribing organization. So I like to think of these being our members, and which is great, because we have access to all of these through this social media, and we've come a very long way using this approach. And I think it's the avenue into anywhere that you want to really sort of start raising interest in anything, really. So I knew that there was all these people, with the exception of the plain tiger, who were just recording in their gardens. And I thought to myself, they need to know what it's like to be with some British butterfly enthusiasts. Now, I'm sure Surrey branch, if you're a member of Surrey branch and you went to go and see the black hair streak this year or the year before, if someone had said black hair streak, I bet you half a dozen or more people would have been running along with their cameras trying to take a photograph, or at least trying to get a look at this. And this was the type of enthusiasm that I wanted to impart to my expat British friends and my Corfu friends on the island. So I took some Sussex friends here. There's Richard Roebuck, Sarah Canning and Colin Knight. We all went out, and it rubbed off. It really did. Here we are sitting having a beer, and I was looking at the tree. I didn't know very much about this. And I said, if ever there was a nettle tree, it's got to be that tree. Look at those leaves. They look like nettle trees. And somebody said, yeah, look, up there's a speckled wood. And I said, that's not going to be a speckled wood. So up we got, and there it was. And there was a nettle tree butterfly. And once we were there and we figured out what we were looking for, within minutes, we'd figured out that they were territorial. The next thing we know, we're finding their caterpillars, and we're looking at the chrysalis, and there was a real joy at suddenly looking at a species that no one had ever really encountered before and learning things about it. I mean, look at that brown caterpillar. It's a bit like a sphinx moth in the way that it's got that posture, but I didn't know that nettle tree caterpillars did that. And it was just simple things like that. And learning new things on a daily basis was just so revolutionary, because as you all know, being British naturalists, butterfly enthusiasts, we know a lot, and it's very challenging to learn new things. Well, at the same time, my very good friend, Peter Sutton, who's been working on the natural history of Corfu for the last 28 years, he said, Dan, why don't you come down with me to the Rhopper Valley? I saw a Grecian copper, and you know how the coppers are territorial. Perhaps we can find one. Of course, we went down and we found them everywhere. In fact, since then, we found Grecian coppers just about all over the island. But at the time, we thought that they were immensely rare, and this was the level of our ignorance. There was so much ignorance about what butterflies were on the island and what were not. And, it is astonishing, the progress that we've made in just 10 years. So these raised lots of questions. First of all, how many butterflies are there on Corfu? Well, Peter had done a fantastically meticulous literature review and figured out that there was probably about 85 that various people said there. Then my friend Stamatis Guinness in 2013, he published a guide to the butterflies of Corfu. There were some doubtful identifications on that, and so we're not entirely sure at that point, by looking at his book, what was there. But it was a fantastic contribution to making people aware of the biodiversity of Corfu. And, throughout my career, I've used butterflies as biodiversity indicators, but he was looking at 70 species. And then Gavlas and Koutsis did a paper in 2018, and they looked at 70, they were reporting 78 species. And what was great about that was that they were looking at genitalia of things. And, for example, Leptidia sinapis, the wood white, and Leptidia dupucella, the eastern wood white. They'd long been said that were both species, and yet they found no evidence whatsoever at all for the eastern wood white. But could still be there, we don't know. So, there is Corfu. What can we say of doing, this work with the Facebook page for 10 years? We reckon that there's 76 plus species. And we would say that the butterfly populations appear to be positive in terms of their sizes, but appearances can be deceptive. Look at that. That's 2015. There was a mass migration of painted ladies. But, really, seriously, how do you ever know what population sizes are like, or what they were like, or what they will be, unless you monitor stuff. And we knew that that was the second step. The first step would be to survey stuff. So what did or didn't we know? Well, we're still unsure about the number of butterfly species on Kukira, the Greek name for Corfu, but I'll come back to that. And then we did not know the distribution of those species on the island. We did not know when they flew during the year. We don't know what their population sizes are. And again, I'll come back to that. And we do not know any of the things, how any of these things have changed. We simply don't know that really. That's a big issue. So look, when I'm trying to explain this to my Corfu friends, I show them this lovely picture of England. This is flying into Gatwick, and it just looks great, doesn't it? England's green and pleasant land. But I'm sure that you and I have listened to Radio 4 when you hear, oh, today bryophytes have declined by 30% since. So, you hear this stuff all the time. It goes by, but all you have to do is type in an organism's name and put the word decline into Google, and you get things like this. It's 47% of Britain's biodiversity since the Industrial Revolution, 60% of UK's important wildlife population declined since the 1970s, and so forth. Like, it's just ridiculous. And as much as you can imagine, you can find. We all know about the car registration plates that no longer get splattered with bugs because of neonicotinoids, reducing bug numbers and stuff like that. And we know that there's a serious problem. But I often use this, and indeed I did in my article to Butterfly magazine for Butterfly Conservation. Diane Fossey, when she looked at the mountain gorillas in Rwanda, looked at a population size of 240, and she expected them to be extinct by 2000. And then, now there's about 1,400. Obviously still a pitifully low number of mountain gorillas, much better than it was. But there must have been a time when there were many, many more of these. There's no way it's conceivable that this species was able to exist at such low numbers. And yet, at any one time, how has that ever been seen? And so this all goes back to, obviously, shifting baselines and Daniel Pauly's concept of how different generations, and I'm sure many of you know this, different generations are aware of it. So if you're born here at the very top of it, and then your children are born here, they will see during their lifetime or you will see during their lifetime that there is a decline. But when you write down here, declines become very, very difficult to see. And I think after this year in the UK, I'm hoping that people will have noticed. What do we know about the number of butterfly species found in Kukira in the past? Well, very little, because most that we know from the literature is from visiting entomologists who spent a day in the countryside while their families were on the beach. If you look at Gerald Durrell's work when he was writing about the nature of the Corfu, I think the death's head hawk moth is a really good example. At the very bottom, he says mottled ginger and black. This macabre skull and crossbones embodied on the plush fur of their thoraxes would come tumbling down the chimney and lay fluttering and twitching in the grate, as if they were doing it weekly. We don't know. This is the trouble. So yet again, there is a real need to monitor. And let's just make the distinction here. Monitoring is where you're looking at abundances, and surveying is when you're looking at where a individual is, and therefore from that you can determine the overall distribution if you get all of those bits of data, and you can look at maybe the flights periods of them, but you know nothing about their abundances. So at this point, it was really quite clear that probably to do some of the things we needed to create an organization. So I was doing some filming with Martin Warren. He was CEO of Butterfly Conservation at the time, and I talked to him about all of this. I said to him, we probably need to do some monitoring, but probably get people doing surveying first. We want to do an atlas, and maybe that would motivate people if there's a book on the shelf somewhere that people could look at. In fact, I spoke to a Greek policeman, and he said to me, Dan, he said, I was really interested in nature when I was a kid, but, I never really took it anywhere because all the books were in English. So we are determined that although our first version of the Butterfly Atlas of Corfu will be in English, it will be translated into Greek. And Martin said to me, Dan, why didn't you call it Corfu Butterfly Conservation? And that I was absolutely delighted with that, because I'd been thinking about calling it that and didn't really feel like I had the cheek to do it, because it didn't seem my place to say. But having Martin say that, it was just like a blessing. So Corfu Butterfly Conservation it became. And we had these objectives to encourage growth of responsible community of butterfly enthusiasts on Corfu. We stole that from Pete Eales. What a brilliant idea that was, to survey the butterflies and determine the number of species, their distribution and flight periods, to find out the butterfly communities of Corfu, if they could be used as indicators for good habitat quality, and if so, help conserve other Corfu wildlife, to identify potential losses of species and habitat, and inform the Greek authorities about the needs to protect them. to publish the butterfly surveys and results and conclusions drawn from the data in a comprehensive atlas, to encourage ecotourism outside the main season, bringing extra revenue to Corfu. This is really, really important because we need the Corfus to understand that their biodiversity has value. You know, the natural heritage really has value. And for Corfu Butterfly Conservation to eventually become a non-profit making organisation working in partnership with both governmental and non-governmental partners in Greece and the United Kingdom and Europe. We've done that. And we continue to do so. Right, okay, well, look, I've got to just say, hats off to Sam Ellis, who was International Director of Butterfly Conservation at that time and Chair of Butterfly Conservation Europe, and Eva Prokop, she was Grants and Trust Fundraising Manager. Both these people really helped us in the early days. We needed some money and we were trying to find it from various places. The Percy Sladen Memorial Fund administered through the Linnean Society, they were really helpful. Rothschild Foundation, Ionian Environmental Foundation, the Royal Entomological Society, Big Nature, and personal donations, all these things helped. But it wouldn't have happened if it had not been for Sam and Eva. And Sam in particular really guided us because of his role and his experience, really guided us. And I think without his help, it would have been really easy to make some mistakes. So we felt that we need to make our presence a bit known. So there's more people going out here. You may be aware of Harry Clark and Mark Colvin in the background there. And off we went again. And we really, we had this inaugural meeting, a formal thing where Corfu Butterfly Conservation actually came into being in the hearts and souls of lots of people. And Lee Durrell there gave talks. Oh, and I must introduce for the first time, this is 2019. This is Anne Sordinas. So Anne was born in Corfu. She lived a lot of her life in America, so she's bilingual, and her passion for butterflies is unparalleled in Corfu. She is without a doubt the Corfu expert on Corfu butterflies, and she's done some incredible stuff that's really helped us with our work. But, you know, I would say her interest grew because of what we were doing. I know that she was interested in lots of things, but her passion for Corfu butterflies has come as a consequence of what we're doing. So originally on this first trip, we did a provisional survey. We wanted to get some idea about what was possible. Harry Clark did a fantastic job mapping the butterflies on the routes you can see on the right-hand side there. Harry provided that for us. We were very, very grateful for the input that Harry put into our work. That really made us realize that, you know, a lot of this stuff was possible. And these are the type of spring butterflies you might see from left to right top there. We've got the mallow skipper, the green underside blue, the large wool brown, the Hungarian skipper, that very nice aberration of the Glanville fritillary. I'd just like to say, because the numbers, the abundances of these species is so great, aberrations are not an uncommon phenomenon. Green hair streak, back down to top, bottom left-hand corner, we've got southern festoon, the eastern orange tip, the Grecian copper, large tortoiseshell, Balkan marbled white, and finally the southern festoon, swallowtail. And you know, things were going great. A good friend, Spiros Yorgos, got us to meet the deputy mayor and introduce us, and he understood very much about what we were trying to do. And then coronavirus. So we were aiming to set our website up and run it from the 1st of January 2020, and our website didn't work particularly well. My very good friend Bob Foreman, biodiversity lead, wrote the code for that, which was great, but the website itself didn't work very well. So we were in a bit of a state with that. At the same time, the pandemic made it really difficult for the Corfus to go out. I mean, it was not nearly as difficult for us in the UK to go out, but they had to do text messaging to get out to go to the supermarket, and the police would stop them. They'd look at their phones, and it was, you know, really quite stringent. And of course, it made it very difficult for people to fly to Corfu and record while we're there. So that was, you know, wow, where do we go from there? And yet, every cloud has a silver lining. And I don't know about you guys, but until that point, I'd never heard of Zoom, and this was a game changer because suddenly we were in a position to be able to have meetings online, much as we are doing now, with Corfus in the English. And the progress we made at that point became unbelievable. Now you can see at the top left-hand corner, we'd previously always had our meetings at Lee Durrell's villa. But, you know, because of this, people like Nick Baker were able to join us, and we were really, really in a really good position to be able to start pushing things forward. So, oh, I should just go back. This guy in the middle here is Steve Cheshire. So Steve Cheshire had produced the Warwickshire branch website, and we got in contact with him, and he used the code that Bob Foreman had produced. And he cloned the Warwickshire website and was able to produce this. And the Royal Entomological Society paid £3,000 through the Goodman Award, which got us on our feet. And we were in a fantastic position to really move forward at that point. And so we launched the website in January 2021. And you can see there's all kinds of stuff. I took these images then, but you would not believe the progress that the website has made since that time. And there's a good reason for that. And that's because we now have our third generation webmaster, David Sheeran, who is an unbelievable genius when it comes to doing things. And most of what he's done is in the background that no one will ever see. Now, all of that stuff will become visible to people once we have written the atlas. But most of the stuff that I can see as an administrator is there designed to help analyze all our data and help us write the atlas. Of course, we really want to engage our Corfu brothers and sisters, and so the whole website, except for the species accounts, the whole website is in Greek. And on the 1st of January 2021, we started the Corfu Butterfly Survey. And the first person to put in the record was Anne Sordinus on the 2nd of January, and she put 3 red admirals. And of course, later that year, we became Corfu Butterfly Conservation at CIC. Now, we wanted to be a Greek organization, but it was immensely complicated and immensely costly. Whereas in the UK, we could become a CIC, a community interest company, for £35, and we had a UK accountant who was very prepared to do all of our accounting on a pro bono basis. So it was the only way forward, and we needed to make that first step, and that's what we did. Of course, going from a project to becoming an organization meant that our team became a committee. So here is the committee of, as it stands at the moment, today, these people, I wish I had the time to explain to you about how valuable their inputs are. All of these people have made incredible inputs into the work that we've done over the last 10 years. And they continue to do so. And I'm immensely proud of the way that the organization has developed because of the commitment that these individuals have made. But I can't go through them all one at a time, so we must move forward. Well, very quickly, through Sam and his work with European butterflies, we worked with the European Butterfly Monitoring Scheme to produce this first document, and Jacob Rothschild, Lord Rothschild, very kindly funded the production. I think 6,000 of these we did in Greek and in English. So they were little guys, helped people identify the butterflies, and it gave information about how they could record stuff on our website and how they could record it on the European Butterfly Monitoring Scheme. At the same time, we produced this, which is our first version of our A4 poster of the butterflies of Corfu. We'd done this in Brighton and Hove, in the Brighton and Lewis Downs biosphere, in Sussex, in Hampshire, in Surrey. These posters have been very, very productive, and so it was very obvious to transfer them to Corfu. I was just saying before this meeting started to Simon Saville that when we first asked for the funding, they said, well, when you got your 30 or 40 of these around the town, what then? And I said, 30 or 40, no, we want 10,000. The Greeks just couldn't get their heads around that. But thankfully, it was the Ionian Environmental Foundation that funded this, and they did do it. And here we are. You can see these are the posters I was very excited about, that we'd launched them with Lee Durrell at a big event. And then we moved them, all 10,000 to storage, and 8,000 immediately went to every single primary school child on the island. And this came up everywhere on social media. I mean, it was so rewarding that the children were so very excited about it. And if you've got one of these in a home, it wasn't just a kid that was seeing it, suddenly we've made a big impact. And we had at that point 2,000 posters left, and I think we probably got like maybe 50 posters now. That's it. So we've done another version. And then we started working with schools. Now, I just want to point out my really good friend here, Zoe Fondoloku. And Zoe worked massively and worked really hard with school children at the Capodistria Museum. And she made an avenue connection with the Capodistria Museum. John Lennon Liverpool has John Lennon Airport, and Corfu has Yannis Kapodistrias. He was a very important politician and dignitary. And so to work at his museum like this was really, really, really helpful. And it started engaging a lot of young people. Now, look, the Percy Sladen Memorial Trust or Fund funded me personally to go to Corfu on a number of occasions, twice, like for about 3 months, on two separate occasions in 2021 and 2022, and that was to look for the hard to reach species that we didn't think that citizen science people would be picking up. And here you've got some idea about what we're looking at. So Harry Clark and Mark Colvin saw number one, which was a small blue, and then there's one. Number two is a small blue that I saw in England, but then you look at the number three, that's a Osiris blue that Matt Rowling saw in France, and then we saw in Corfu, that's myself and Sordinus and my son Indy, we saw a butterfly that looks very much like an Osiris blue to me. And well, we put this out on the Facebook pages of Europe, and there was no conclusion about it. So, you know, here we are in a situation where it could well be that the Osiris blue is on Corfu, but we're just not sure about it. And we'll come back to that. We found out things like this. Look, here we are. This is the Papilio lexinor, the southern swallowtail. Finding the caterpillars was an exciting thing, but knowing what they fed on was even more exciting. So finding out that they were on Scaligeria napiformis and Apopanax bromium was a really great thing, but we knew about what they did in other countries in the Mediterranean, but to find out that's what they were on Corfu was great. Learning about, you know, the ecology of things like the Eastern baton blue was another lovely thing. Figuring out, observing just in the field where they were and what they were doing was great. And then look at this. This is a Queen of Spain fritillary. We've had very, very few records of them, but isn't it ironic that today we get a record of the Queen of Spain fritillary coming in from Marina? And this almost invariably is a migrant, you know, but at the time we weren't sure. And we were up in the mountains, in this middle picture here, found one Queen of Spain fritillary in each meadow that we went to. There were 6 different meadows. Yeah, so interesting stuff. And, you know, while I was there, I was able to give tours to different people, fit that into my equation. And of course, we managed to have our first AGM, which was great. You know, so slowly we're building the momentum, utilizing the program of work that is very common to everybody that knows about how BC works in the UK, just replicating that in Corfu. In many ways, what we were trying to be is a branch of butterfly conservation in Corfu. Oh, and we did. If you haven't seen the butterfly race, you can go to Dr. Danahar on YouTube, and you can see some of our butterfly races that we've done in the past. You know, basically people get in a car and they whiz around the island and they see whatever they can, and they compete 2 teams, and it just raises people's awareness of it. And you stop off and you meet mayors and you meet school children, all kinds of things. Just a lot of fun. Of course, another thing that we've done is, you know, worked with green wings. In fact, we've got a holiday coming up this year, and hey, you might be interested to know that you can now go to our website. I've done this for today. Look, put in the 12th of November, and let's say I'm going for 2 weeks. And our website now generates, based on our data, because we've got 4 years of data now, what you're likely to see. You're very certain to see a plain tiger, would you believe? You know, you're very likely to see a lang short-tailed blue, and so forth. And this tells me there's a probability of seeing up to 23 species. Now, that's all part of what David Sheeran does. He's an absolute genius. He's a blessed man. I really couldn't do without him, and Corfu Butterfly Conservation really benefits from his input. So look, as I said, you know, Capodistria Museum, what a great organization they are. You can see on the right there, that's Daria. She was the director. And I said to her one day, you know, look, as an English organization, we can't employ anybody in Greece because the Greek authorities will want us to have a Greek tax number, and we won't have one. Could you employ someone if we gave you a day of their time and we would have 2 days of their time? And she said, sure. It was as simple as that. Things are never quite as simple as that, because of course it then become quite complicated. We finally got a funder from the Ionian Environmental Foundation and the Rothschild Foundation. And all of this has been possible because of my good friend Chris Little, who was like a dog with a bone. He did not let it go, and he's worked and worked hard to make sure that we've managed to get this work going on. So Chris's work has really made this possible. And, you know, in many ways, I feel a bit, what's the word, guilty. I'm so proud that this has happened, and yet it's Chris that's done the work. And I don't think that anybody should ever not be aware of that. Anyway, so, hey, look at this. We employed Anne Sordinus. I mean, who would you employ? Anyway, so she's now our educational outreach officer, and we're looking, she's just started, and we're beginning to start to work with schools. So the data that we've recorded so far, here we go. Right, to date, we have 99,288 butterfly sightings. I'm absolutely confident we get 100,000 sightings by the end of this year. I can't tell you how proud I am about that. You know, after 4 years of doing this work, just a recording, and next year's the last year to record. I mean, it's really, really exciting when you think about it, because when we've done the season for the Southern Festoon, you know, that's it. That's all the 5 years of Southern Festoons that we're ever going to see in this round of recording. And here, look, I love this guy. This guy was my barman for maybe 10, 15 years. And yet he records butterflies. He's a Corfiet and he records butterflies every single day or thereabouts. Konstantinos Zangas. Yeah, so he's a really fantastic guy. And that's, to me, is a real success. A real success to get a Corfiet to start recording like that. Yeah, and so, you know, it's a very pleasing thing. Now, look, results 2021, 2024. I think the pictures speak for themselves. We've got some bare bits in the island that we need to look at, but hopefully we'll plug those through 2025. Hey, look at these. These are sightings. You can see that in May, you see the vast majority of butterflies, and in October, you see, again, another peak. But of course, July and August, it really does minimize. But hey, notice there is never a month of the year that you don't see butterflies. And in fact, there is never a day when we haven't recorded butterflies. And look, if we superimpose the rain and the heat, you can see that the May and the October temperatures are very, very similar. And it really, the decrease in numbers in August and July are all about it being very, very hot and very, very dry. And butterflies estivate or go into some form of diapause, then, and the numbers really decrease. So let's have a look at some of this. The clouded yellow, that's a species that clearly, and this is real data now, this is 4 years data you're looking at. This is species which are mostly migratory. Obviously, it's on the island as well, but look at it in the summer months. It's just gone, isn't it? But, you know, multi-brooded, multi-voltine, I would say. Very difficult to see any real trends there. Having said that, look at this. This is Southern Festoon. Now, the Southern Festoon, as you know, we really struggle to find that. And I think part of the reason, if you look at the distribution map, part of the reason why we're not getting many dots, I reckon it's all over the island, is because it's out so early and there's no one there. In fact, if you look at this, I can see that in the middle of that flight diagram, I'm amazed that we're getting records there because no one from the UK is flying there before that point. And so these are Corfius and expats putting records in for us. And I think that if it was out earlier in the year, sorry, later in the year, that map would be completely covered. But it gives you some indication as to what's there and how exciting it is that there's so much more to explore. I'd also like to show you this. Now look, Ken Elsom, I'm sure many of you know Ken. I said to him, Ken, you know, when we started doing this 2.5 years ago, at the point I was talking to him, Ken, we totally forgot to put in altitude. And I said, is there anything you could do about that? And he said, Dan, he said, maybe there's 10 people on the planet. You could have asked. I'm one of them, he said. And he managed to get data from open source NASA data from the space shuttle Atlantis, perhaps it was, where they used a laser to do radar telemetry of the topography of the island. And from that, he's able to estimate all of our records to very, very meters. And so all the records that we had in the past immediately got altitude data, and all the records in the future get altitude data. And this is one of those really interesting trends. You can see that the Southern Festoon, you don't see up high at all. It's all about low level stuff. And that makes sense because it likes really damp, wet habitats. So a lot of the stuff at the top is just gonna, where it gets wet, it rains and the water flows off straight away. Hey, look at this, the other end of the spectrum. This is in the autumn, Lang short-tailed blue. So if you're interested in seeing that, that's when you want to go. It's a really nice butterfly. And then look at this. If we weren't looking at this in weekly events, you'd never know that it was trivoltine. So trivoltine, bivoltine, and univoltine. I mean, all of these have got clearly different strategies for dealing with the habitat that the environment they're living in. And, you know, this type of data, which is fairly robust, and these are all years that we've got so far. If we were to look at them individually each year, you still see pretty much the same trends, but the cumulative data really shows that there's lots of really interesting stuff going on there, and it really does help us understand the ecology. And finally, this is the iconic species, the southern swallowtail, the one that we use for our organization. And we've got a really nice little trend there of that in the middle. And you know, this butterfly I thought was a mountainous species. I'm beginning to think it's more about carboniferous rock. And we found it all the way down that west coast which we really didn't know about until over the last couple of years. So that's really exciting. Again, you know, making discoveries that no one ever knew about is thrilling beyond all measure, to know that you're contributing to science in this way. And finally, look here, look, this is the species richness of the whole area. Yeah, that's pretty amazing in itself. To see that, yeah, it's really, really good. And I think that in May, we've got something like 68 species, the maximum. In October, we're up to 56 species. There's a lot of species you can see in a month. Last year, we got our first new species, the millet skipper, Pelipedus thrax. Well, that's really exciting. A few very small locations up there in the north, and now it's spread massively, and we've got another paper on the way for that. Habitat management, well, what can I say to you? Well, we've done a number of events in gardens, getting people to go there. There are people there looking at this southern small white that everyone's hoping to see in the UK at one point. And you know, there's been a lot of interest in gardens. And as a consequence, do you remember John Denner at the end when he used to walk around and figure out what all the butterflies were that he was looking at in his garden? It helped him figure out what to plant. And so we've got on our website a tentative idea about what ornamental planting you can put in your garden to attract the butterflies of Corfu, and probably is applicable to lots of places, but Corfu specifically. But we wanted to learn more about that, and at the same time, Corfutes love to strim everything. In the spring, they strim orchids, they strim all kinds of vegetation, and there's a good reason for that. It's because they're concerned about wildfires, and they get fined if they don't remove the vegetation because of that. But we feel that there's some room for with regards to that in terms of habitat management, and it's the same regarding to the management of their olives. As I said, there's an awful lot of olives on the island, and you know, in the past they have pollarded. This is a very obscure one where they've actually coppiced these olives, and we found through our research, just by by surveying the butterflies, that this really does appear to have an impact on the butterflies, a positive impact, obviously, just like it does in the UK. So before he died, Jacob Rothschild very kindly agreed to allowing us to do some work on his land. So we're doing strimming trials. We're looking at olive grove management, which has already had astonishing impacts on butterfly numbers. And we've got planting for ornamental nectar sources. If I just go back to management of ancient pastures, you can see there the small blues. We have found quite a few small blues on the island now, but they are restricted to these ancient pastures. Mazarine blues, as I said before, the Queen of Spain fritillaries, all in these types of habitat, but there's very few of these habitats. And what you have to understand is in the last 60 years, the shift from agrarian lifestyle to a tourist lifestyle has been astonishing. You know, think about it. I'm 63 years of age, and there are people of my age who have gone from growing up and being born on the land and getting all their food from the land to living in a culture which has iPads and iPhones and computers and flying on airplanes, and their family transport was a donkey. You know, I mean, it's astonishing what changes there have been, and as a consequence, the landscape of Corfu has changed drastically. And also, you know, all the way around the coast, there's this tale. I'm not sure if it's true; it might be apocryphal, but apparently, when the land was inherited, all of the coastal land was given to the girls because it wasn't seen as very valuable, and all the land inside the island was given to the boys because it was good for agriculture. But of course, now all this coastal development has led to the girls being very rich. Anyway, this is Paleocastritza. 4 years later, same location, which is unfortunate because, of course, that was the first place we found the Mediterranean skipper, Gigenis nostradamus. So there's a lot going on, and a lot of and I'm sure the Corfutes are not aware of what could be lost. And finally, management by fire. This is Eremites. There was a fire when we were trying to do some work there. That's a big story. I'll tell you about that another day. But it led to a flush of this Jerusalem thorn, which happens to be the host plant of the little tiger blue. Now, I'm the only individual to have seen any number of this butterfly this century on the island, and we think that it probably migrates from Albania, but it could be that it's linked to fire. It could be that fire is what's needed in order to be able to make habitat for this butterfly. So there's lots of things to think about in terms of management. Now, in 2023, there was a big fire. It was a massive, if you've looked at European butterflies, it was a massive fire, and that fire, I think it burnt 28 1,000 hectares. Some ridiculous number of hectares were burnt. And but we knew what was there before because of the work that I'd done from the Linnean Society. And so we really needed some funding. And thankfully, the IEF stood up, the Ionian Environmental Foundation, and we worked with a whole bunch of different people to collect that data. And what we found is that the burnt sites are very, if you're looking on the left here, this is a detrended correspondence analysis graph showing on the first axis the major gradient of variation, which separates the burnt sites from the edge effect sites and the unburnt sites, showing that there really is a difference between these communities. And yet, on average, the species richness of them all was exactly the same, about 40 species in each of these habitats. Now, remember, we did these surveys less than a year later. So there's recolonization up to 40 species within, and that's very rewarding to know that. But the species were not the same. So the species that we were seeing there were maybe lots of migratory stuff that really dispersed really well, like bath whites and things like that, and also things which responded really quickly to early successional habitats like common blues, masses of common blues. And yet, on the other hand, all the unburnt stuff, they had species that weren't in the burnt areas, which of course couldn't tolerate the burning. And in many cases, that meant the satyrids, like Delatin's grayling, the great banded grayling. These things really did not suffer, did not cope very well. And when you think about it, the grass feeders, so the eggs, caterpillars, and the chrysalises will all be burnt. And even at night, if there's flyers, the adults will be burnt. So they've not done very well at all. And at the same time, I've just got to say, there's tentative evidence that the eastern orange tip actually may have really benefited, because that feeds on woad, which is a biennial, which in the first year grows as a rosette. The second year puts up a meter long frond spike with all of its inflorescence on it, and that's what the caterpillars feed on. And this year, the whole hillsides were just covered with it because, of course, the fire went over, burnt everything, but not the rosettes. And then the rosettes could put up the next year. So we're thinking 2025 could be a really good year for the eastern orange tip. Future. Okay, look, didn't expect that in my planning. That was one of my last trips out. I went with the director of the Ionian Environmental Foundation. We saw that. I just could not believe my eyes. Cleopatra gynandromorph, the only one that I've ever seen in my life, and it was just a marvelous thing to see. But anyway, DNA barcoding. So Vlad Dinka, Leonardo Di Porto, and Roger Villa have been really, really great at waiting for us to get permission, and we've gone through we've quoted the Communo and Montreal protocols because Greece has signed up to that, and we've got help from the British Embassy, and eventually, after 5 years, the Greek authorities have allowed us permission to do the DNA barcoding, and I'm really grateful that our young colleague George Kalinassis is now become our CBC science officer. So we're very keen for him to work with our colleagues in these different countries, in Finland, Italy, and Spain, because George is bilingual. His mother's English, his father's Greek, and it's great having these Corfits really involved in what we're doing. Yeah, we decided who the publishers are going to be. Of course, it had to be Peter Creed and Pisces because they just do such a fabulous job. I've written the first species account, the Southern Festoon, and I'm working mostly with Anne Sordinas, but we're hoping to have others included in the production of this atlas. The Ionian Archipelago, well, at the end of this year, of course, end of 2025, I will stop doing the verification. But we're looking at the possibility of just simply expanding the map and allowing the recording of butterflies from the entire Ionian Archipelago. And as a consequence, I'm training at the moment Zoe von der Luca, who's based in Crete now, to become our new verifications officer. Why are we doing this? Because we recognize that our survey work has had a real impact in engaging people. And of course, what we want that to be is just a first step into the next step, which is, of course, monitoring. And monitoring is essential if we are able to see, by using standardized methods, TransX, or even the 15-minute app on the EBMS app. That's all really valuable in able to see how populations go up and down. And that's what we need to know, because it appears that the butterfly populations of Corfu are good, but they may have been even more abundant and diverse in the past. And of course, if we don't look right now at what's going on, there's no way of knowing where they're going in the future, and we won't know whether or not they've been in trouble in any way in the future if we don't know what's happening now. And of course, we do also want to support our colleagues who are doing Project Apollon, which is, or Apollo rather, which is the Greek butterfly monitoring scheme. It's very important from our point of view that we support our Greek colleagues in this respect, and so it all makes a great deal of sense to us to do so. So what can you do to help? You could participate in the Green Wings trip, because that helps with the survey and they give us 10% of their profits. If you're in a position to donate funding, we would be very grateful to hear from you. And if you live or are traveling to Corfu, please record your sightings on our website. It's really, really important. So thanks go to all the people that I've talked to about in this talk. All of these organisations have helped us in one way or another. And hey, look, thank you. I really appreciate your time.